Chapter 3. Requiem. Only the wounded, bleeding moon remained, hanging low and watchful. For the audience, it was the most breathtaking finale the Phantom Rogue had ever conjured. They rose in thunderous applause, cheering the spectacle, the heroism, the tragic beauty. But in the alcove shadows, young Gabrielle clutched her own ocarina so tightly the runes pressed into her palms. The veiled matriarch's face had been hidden, yet the way she had held the instrument, the exact curve of her stance, the final small smile, it was her own reflection. When the illusory matriarch had bled, when the silver life threads had streamed from her chest, Gabrielle had felt a phantom ache bloom beneath her own ribs. She understood, on a level deeper than words, that the play was never mere entertainment. It was a warning meant only for her. And somewhere in the silence between the final fading notes, the real door waited, patient, ancient. The audience gasped in delight at the spectacle, unaware that Thorn's eyes flicked toward the alcoves where his daughter hid, a silent plea embedded in the illusion. See this. Remember. Gabrielle's breath caught, her skin prickled with a chill that had nothing to do with the alcove's draft. Why did the chains look so fragile, as if one wrong note could snap them? She shifted uneasily, fingers tightening on her ocarina. The runes on the chains matched the ones etched into her instrument. Now they seemed like warnings, pulsing in time with her quickening heartbeat. The witch prophesied in the illusions had her face obscured, but the way she held the small instrument, the curve of her stance, it mirrored Gabrielle's own reflection in puddles after rain. Could it be? The thought sent a wave of dread crashing over her, heavier than the scarlet moon's gaze. A low, almost inaudible growl rolled through the theater's acoustics, dismissed by most as dramatic effect, but Gabrielle felt it keenly. The growl slithered into her ears like a whisper meant only for her, stirring a dread that coiled in her gut. It wasn't just sound, it was a presence, ancient and hungry, pressing against her mind. Flashes came unbidden, fragments of dreams where shadows hammered at a door in the dark. She pressed back against the alcove wall, heart pounding. The heroine on stage looked too much like her. Same dark blonde hair, same small frame. Was this play about her? The thought was absurd, yet it rooted her in place, a cold sweat breaking across her brow. The audience cheered the tightening chains, but Gabrielle saw only the cracks widening, felt the door's pulse echoing in her veins. Something was stirring, not just on stage, but everywhere, under the moon dipped in blood, in the drifting airships, in the very air she breathed. The three great ones' plan felt like a fragile hope, their sacrifice a temporary shield against an evil that now seemed to whisper her name. A lilac glow kindled in her gaze. Her memories burst forth, the illusions shifting darker in her mind. Shadowy tendrils, pale figures with obsidian eyes, slithered from the door still standing in her mind, testing the chains. One by one, illusory demons clawed at the bindings, their forms rippling like smoke. A towering abomination rose behind the door, hammering once, twice, the stage floor trembling in resonance. The crowd held their breath. Another boom. The floor jumped. Invisible chains groaned. A single link flexed, bent, threatened to snap. Gabrielle's dread deepened, a vice around her chest. The hammering reverberated through her bones, as if the stage blows were aimed at her. She wanted to run, to shout, but her limbs felt heavy, pinned by an invisible weight. The demon's eyes in her mind seemed to seek her out, gleaming from the shadows. It was just a play, she whispered to herself, but the words tasted like lies. Her father had taught her to trust her instincts in the streets, to sense danger before it struck. Tonight, those instincts screamed. The bindings were real, the evil not myth, and the key was closer than anyone knew. The audience leaned forward, enthralled. Such realism, a noble whispered. The Phantom Rogue outdoes himself tonight. Thorn, mid-stage now, raised both hands in a flourish that looked like part of the choreography. The silence between his sorcery seemed to say, that's where the lock turns backward. The melody in her head twisted slightly, off-key for a split second, and in that moment, Gabrielle glimpsed something terrible. A vision of the door cracking open, shadows spilling out like blood. She gasped, clutching her ocarina tighter. Her father's eyes met hers across the theater, just for an instant, filled with sorrow and urgency. He knew, he had always known, and now, so did she, on some wordless level. The play wasn't warning the audience, it was warning her. Gabrielle's fingers danced silently over her ocarina's holes, mirroring the heroine's lullaby. For a breath, the world felt aligned. The kingdom's great airships drifting overhead seemed guardians rather than omens, their sails catching moonlight like silver wings. Then the darkness came. A real rumbling growl slithered through the air, a serpent in paradise, echoing the illusory one moments before, but this time undeniable, laced with malice that made Gabrielle's blood run cold. Thorn froze, eyes widening as the stage shadows thickened in perfect mimicry of his own projections. From the rafters descended figures cloaked in midnight shrouds that drank the light, pallid skin veined with unnatural hunger, eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. They moved with predatory grace, silent as the grave, demons unbound, servants of the very evil the play had just warned against. The first scream tore the illusion. One creature lunged at a woman awestruck in the confused crowd, jaws unhinging grotesquely, just as the stage abomination had hammered the door. Ivory fangs plunged into her throat, blood sprayed in a bright arc, splattering the front rows. Cheers twisted into panic as more Night Stalkers emerged, rippling with restrained fury. Wizards, mages, and warriors surged forward in futility, arcane bolts flashing blue-white, swords carving desperate silver arcs through the horde. Spells detonated in bursts of light, blades rang against claw and fang, but for every fiend felled, two more rose, wounds closing like smoke. Blood fell in sheets, soaking velvet seats and marble floors. High above, one of Lyrandor's majestic airships, its hull adorned with gilded filigree and crystal engines, lurched violently. Something unseen had torn its heart. Flames erupted along its flanks. It listed, groaning like a dying beast, then plummeted, mirroring the stage door's threatened collapse. The massive vessel crashed into the crowded stands with apocalyptic force, splintering wood and stone, crushing friend and foe alike in a thunderous ruin of fire, twisted metal, and shattered screams. Dust and embers billowed outward, a funeral pyre for the innocent and the damned. Gabrielle's heart hammered. "Father!" Her whisper drowned in chaos. The demons were endless, their numbers swelling like a black tide. Tears blurred her vision, but survival ignited. She snatched her ocarina and bolted through a side door, death's cacophony at her heels. Outside, no sanctuary waited. Airships burned across the sky, hulls cracked by unseen forces, raining fiery debris like judgment. Guards lay eviscerated, armor crumpled before the horde spilling from the theater. Pale fiends and raging beasts united under the guttural, demonic command. Undead feasted on the living, skeletal warriors clashing swords and armor with soldiers and guards. The theater became a slaughterhouse. Bodies heaped, limbs rent, throats torn in crimson sprays. The air reeked of iron and terror. The symphony was over, drowned beneath wails and wet, ripping flesh. Gabrielle pressed to the wall, finally blending with the shadows, moving just as her father had taught her. Her ocarina slipped from numb fingers, but she caught it, clutching it harder as though letting go would sever the last thread connecting her to the man who had just screamed her name across a slaughterhouse. The main auditorium lay ahead through a half-collapsed archway. She could hear it before she saw it. Wet, ripping sounds, steel striking bone, a high, keening wail that might have been human or demon or both. And underneath it all, the low, constant crackle of Thorn's dying illusion still trying to fight. Phantom blades scraping real armor, spectral horses screaming as they dissolved. She reached the edge of the arch and peered around the broken stone. The once golden auditorium was now a charnel pit, lit only by scattered mage fire and the burning drapes that had fallen from the balconies. Bodies lay in grotesque piles near the exits where people had bottlenecked trying to flee. In the center aisle, perhaps 30 paces away, the last knot of resistance still burned. Thorn stood, somehow still stood, in the middle of a shrinking circle of amethyst smoke. His long coat was shredded across the back. Dark blood glistened from shoulder to hip. In one hand, he held a thin black stiletto that flickered in and out of visibility like a dying candle. Around him, 4 or 5 perfect duplicates of himself moved in cruelly beautiful synchrony, lunging, vanishing, reappearing to drive blades into kidneys or throats. The demons closest to him were no longer certain which figure was flesh and which was lie. He was buying seconds, maybe a minute, not much more. Gabrielle's throat closed. She wanted to scream for him. She wanted to run straight down the aisle and throw herself between him and the next claw. Instead, she forced herself to scan the shadows along the near wall, looking for the narrow service passage her father had once shown her, the one that led under the stage and came out near the royal balcony stairs. Then the true horror rose. From the royal balcony, an unspeakable figure, pale as bone, eyes burning hell green, raised a hand. Crystals dimmed. Whispers poured from him, summoning shadowy snakes that coiled around survivors, twisting them into thralls. Gabrielle now hid amongst the corpses of men and women, watching with horror flashing from her gentle eyes, now glowing lilac like her father's, peeking through flesh laid on flesh. Thorn, the phantom rogue, stepped into the center aisle as though the carnage were merely another act. The long black trench coat swirled like liquid night, blood seeping between the shreds on his back. His cold regard burned from beneath the fedora's brim, luminous and unblinking, carrying the unbearable weight of every ending he had already foreseen. Power flared through him. Amethyst light threaded the smoke as illusions erupted, not mere phantoms, but razor-edged masterpieces of deception that bled into reality. The air shimmered. Phantom legions of armored knights materialized along the aisles, their blades gleaming with false steel. Spectral dragons coiled from the rafters, roaring illusory fire that scorched demon minds. Mirrors of light fractured the stage into a labyrinth of duplicates, dozens of phantom rogues darting and striking, each seeming as real as the last. Demons slashed at empty air, some impaled themselves on spears, turning on their own kin in blind rage. For long, agonizing minutes, Thorn held the horde at bay, buying precious seconds for the fleeing crowd. His illusions wove a tapestry of deception so perfect that even the keenest infernal senses faltered. A dozen perfect copies of himself materialized in a perfect circle around the nearest cluster of Night Stalkers. Each duplicate wore the same midnight coat, the same tilted fedora, the same cold amethyst stare. They moved in mirror-synchronized silence, then fractured the pattern. One phantom lunged low in a sliding assassin's crouch, coat flaring like wings. Another vaulted high in a spiraling backflip. A third simply vanished in illusory smoke mid-stride, reappearing behind a demon with knife hand already driving toward the spine. The real Thorn raised both scarred hands. The air ruptured, not with light this time, but with illusory smoke. Thick, coiling white smoke clouds laced with black and amethyst threads erupted from his palms in explosive pulses. It did not rise lazily toward the rafters. It hunted. Tendrils raced along the floor like black water, climbed velvet seatbacks, poured into throats and eyes. Within seconds, the auditorium became a drowning sea of blinding mist. Screams turned wet and choking. Except for Thorn. To him, the smoke was transparent, amethyst threads of control woven through every curling wisp. He saw every silhouette, every panicked lunge, every exposed throat. The smoke was his stage, his curtain, his scalpel. He vanished into it. He flowed through the pandemonium like smoke threaded with steel. Forward rolls under lunging abominations, brutal kicks that shattered jawbones, dagger slashes delivered with clinical precision. Duplicates peeled away from the real one, spreading through the choking black fog like predators in tall grass. Illusions layered upon assassination. Mirrors of magenta light fractured the smoke into a kaleidoscope labyrinth. Phantom ravens swarmed in black cyclones, blinding and slashing at eyes and throats. A forward roll under a lunging abomination, coat sweeping the floor, ended in an explosive kippa. Mid-air, he twisted, one boot lashing out in a brutal crescent kick that shattered jawbone. Before the creature could recover, he had already unleashed a flurry of dagger slashes and stabs, instantly incapacitated his prey. The assassination came so fast it looked like an afterimage. A night stalker, pale, vein-laced, obsidian-eyed, lunged toward a fleeing noblewoman. Thorn materialized from the smoke directly behind it, fedora never slipping. His left hand clamped the demon's jaw from below, forcing its head in an arc, the demon tumbling over himself. His right drove a thin, blackened stiletto, pulled from inside his cuff in one fluid motion, upward through the soft palate into the brain. The blade twisted once, clinical, then withdrew. The creature arched and dropped without a sound, smoke curling out of its open mouth like a last exhale. Another demon charged from the left. Thorn did not turn. He simply stepped sideways into denser smoke and reappeared on the creature's right flank 3 heartbeats later. A single rising elbow strike to the base of the skull. Vertebrae crunched. As it fell, he was already moving, coat trailing smoke like dark wings. The duplicates appeared next, not mere visual copies, but smoke-formed echoes that moved independently. 3 identical thorns peeled away from the real one in perfect silence. They spread out through the choking black fog like predators in tall grass. The phantoms spread out for the hunt, while Thorn sprinted low along a row of seats, sliding under a swinging claw, then rose inside a demon's guard. A palm strike to the solar plexus folded it in half. The follow-up knife hand to the throat crushed cartilage. Thorn dissolved into swirling smoke the instant the body hit the floor. Another duplicate vaulted a balustrade, ran along the wall in open defiance of gravity, smoke coiling under his boots to support the impossible angle, then launched into a triple somersault. He landed with both heels driving into a demon's skull who covered his face in terror, cowering in fear, confused, still trying to figure out what just happened. The Phantom Rouge, standing behind the demon, flickered out of existence. The third simply stood motionless, arms loose, fedora low, while 4 demons charged through the murk. At the last heartbeat, the figure split into 4 overlapping versions, each stepping a half second out of phase. Claws and fangs passed through empty smoke. Momentum carried the demons crashing into each other. Fangs tore into kin. Wet gurgles replaced roars. Running the edge of the burning airship, he seamlessly grabbed a chain as he passed by, leaping over a towering abomination, looped around its neck passing by. He yanked downward while kicking its knee backward. The massive abomination in agony fell forward. Thorn, gracefully picking up a soldier's claymore, ran along the fallen beast, a graceful spinning corkscrew side flip, like a spear until the perfect moment, and with a single stroke, its head came free in a spray of black ichor as he rolled across the floor. Thorn landed with absurd confidence, dropping the sword with a clank. He fixed his hat, returning it to the insolent angle that hid his blazing eyes. Demons, abominations, skeletons, and other unworldly creatures surrounded Thorn, believing they had him trapped. But Thorn threw open his arms wide, the demons falling backwards, terrified of the monster standing before them. Holding a broad dagger in each hand, he looked upward and laughed, then spoke in a loud roar. "There is a method to my madness, isn't there?" He taunted the demons, who shuddered in fear. A demon lunged from above, leaping from the balcony rail. Thorn sidestepped with liquid grace, caught its descending wrist, spun behind it using its own momentum, dagger gracefully gliding along the demon's neck, Thorn's hand flicking outward like the bow of a violin, dagger splattering blood. As it staggered, he flipped backward over its shoulders, planting both boots on its head and launching himself toward the next target. He vaulted off a velvet seatback, spun into a layout backflip over a lunging horror, landed in a crouch on a marble balustrade. From there, he hurled himself sideways in a corkscrew aerial, coat trailing like dark wings, and drove both heels into the neck of an airborne fiend, snapping vertebrae before rolling across its falling body to absorb the impact. Another abomination charged. Thorn dropped into a sudden low spin, coat flaring like a matador's cape, then exploded upward in a flash kick that snapped its head back. Flipping midair, he twisted. Now upside down, he flew over the beast, daggers piercing both eyes. Thorn landed, rolling into a perfect crouch, daggers held upside down, hands crossing over shoulders in stoic poise. Slowly, he stood up, eyes flashing now like lightning, the awakening of Sorcerer Kings flowing through his veins, his power now rivaling the real Silas. The audience that remained alive watched in stunned awe and horror. The Phantom Rogue was no longer performing, he was conducting death. Yet the onslaught waged war as a violent storm, Thorn's glowing eyes the heart of the storm. A towering abomination, molten veins pulsing, shattered through the grandest mirage. Thorn met it head-on. He sprinted straight at it, then dropped into a sudden baseball slide between its legs. As he passed beneath, he rolled to his feet behind it and vaulted up its back in gravitational defiance. His daggers surgically severed its spine mid-neck. Black blood fountained as he rode the head of the falling beast, stepping lightly off at the last moment to land in front of the still-living, unmoving corpse, fedora still perfectly angled. For one heartbeat, the theater seemed to hold its breath. Then the necromancer on the balcony laughed, a wet, hollow sound. Beautiful, the creature rasped, but beauty bleeds. A lance of pure necrotic force, green-black and writhing, lanced from the balcony straight toward Thorn's heart. He twisted impossibly fast, coat snapping like a flag in a gale. The lance grazed his shoulder, fabric and flesh tore. Amethyst eyes widened for the first time that night. Real pain. The illusion army flickered. Thorn spotted Gabrielle, frozen near the side door, eyes wide with recognition and terror. He smiled, just once. Small, tired, relieved. "Run, Ellie," he shouted over the din. "The relic, the song, it's the key." Then another towering abomination struck from behind. Claws punched through his back and out through his chest, lifting him off the floor. Blood bloomed dark across the black trench coat. A Night Stalker lunged, fangs sinking deep into his shoulder. He did not scream long, only once, raw, final, piercing Gabrielle's soul. His body went limp. Amethyst light guttered out. The illusions collapsed in a dying cascade. The fedora tumbled free, raven feather catching one last gleam of firelight before it hit the marble. Thorn, father, guardian, phantom rogue, was gone. Gabrielle's sob was lost in the chaos. She snatched her ocarina and bolted through the side door, death roaring at her heels. Behind her, Lyrandor screamed its agony, a symphony of despair. What ancient evil had awakened? Tears blurred her vision, but survival ignited. Outside, no sanctuary waited. Airships burned across the sky, hulls cracked by unseen forces, raining fiery debris like judgment. Guards lay eviscerated, armor crumpled before the horde spilling from the theater. Pale fiends and raging beasts united under the guttural, demonic command. Undead feasted on the living, skeletal warriors clashing swords and armor with soldiers and guards. The crimson moon watched impassively as she vanished into shadow, a lone child in a world unraveling into the trail of corruption which had begun. Somewhere, a darkness stirred, and the melody she carried might be the last fragile note against the coming night.